You're gonna be a big success. Herb says it to me all the time. I'm not worried about if you'll become a star. I'm more worried about how you'll change when it happens. Look over there. See those tar pits? Hollywood's a real pretty town that's smack on top of all that black tar. By the time you realize you're sinking, it's too late.
So here's the thing about Bojack Horseman's commentary on Hollywood/woo/woob. Honestly, I think the culture of Hollywood and the atmosphere all these characters are surrounded by plays one of the most important roles in shaping who they become and how they developed into the people they are by the time we meet them at the beginning of the series. Not to say that they aren't responsible for their own mistakes or shortcomings, but with such a visible and suffocating amount of pop culture, politics, and fame starvation surrounding them all, it's difficult not to let themselves be drawn in and changed by that climate, which unfortunately some of them are. But fortunately, not all of them stay that way, which does prove that it is still their responsibility to own up for their mistakes and not to blame it all on society as Bojack would like to earlier in the series when he is facing his mistakes with Sarah Lynn.
I mean, maybe you could have been a better role model when she was young, but also she never really had a chance. This is what our celebrity culture does to people.
So what you're saying is, everything is society's fault, and we as individuals never need to take responsibility for anything. I like that. I didn't do anything wrong because I can't do anything wrong. Because we're all just products of our environment, bouncing around like marbles in the game of Hungry Hungry Hippos that is our random and cruel universe. Yeah, it's not my fault, it's society. Everything is because of society.
Dude, just let him have this.
Hooray! Everything is meaningless! Nothing I do has consequence!
Many of the main characters are able to realize how fickle the joys that Hollywoo's entertainment industry provides really are. Side note, before we get started, I had to return to the telescope a lot to write the script, and I hate watching that episode because it has that one scene where Herb and Bojack read my intro for filth.
Here's the thing about most long-distance plans.
Ugh, I hate when people say that. Here's the thing.
It's so stupid.
Just say the thing. You don't need to introduce the concept that there's going to be a thing.
And for everyone's info, no, my intro is not a Bojack reference. It's just a weird thing I settled into. As far as I know, it works, but let me know if it bothers you. Charlotte first describes LA as a tar pit in season 1 of the series, and while yes, she does recant this statement in season 2 into something that is much more true, in my own opinion, I do still think there is some truth to how she described the allure of Hollywood. Fame is a double-edged sword. It, of course, feels incredible to receive the attention and praise from thousands of people, but it is also incredibly addictive and a slippery slope into selling out your own body and self entirely to the industry. Not only that, but Hollywood itself being marketed as a, quote, place where dreams can come true, catches people in this trap with simply the promise of fame, and keeps them there while it chews up their optimism and hope until they're left bitter and vindictive, like so many in Hollywoo are throughout this series. Wow, this video is dark as hell so far. I'm so sorry. But hey, that's the horse show. But to be fair to me, they do go really hard on the glitz and glamour on the exterior of Hollywood, only to show the really dark underbelly of it all that all of that beauty is covering up. I mean, I love when we first see the executives of the industry and see that they don't even laugh.
And the suits from ABC are here. Look, they're nodding. That's the executive version of laughing.
They are joyless, robotic, puppets of a larger, maniacal fabrication designed to draw more and more people into it. I mean, they are talking about creating a comedy series here, and they are just sitting there nodding. Bojack definitely could have grown past his own trauma, as we see from where he is when he meets Herb and Charlotte back in the 80s, even though he's drank much before and learned alcoholic tendencies from his parents, as season 6 shows us. He vehemently refuses to get drunk or embarrass himself around alcohol.
I got you a beer. It's on the house. Don't tell my boss.
Thanks, Charlotte, but one beer gets me tipsy.
He's actually very aware of his own limits, which are staggeringly lower than they are today, and knows how to stop and control himself in a way that we are definitely not used to. And we see later in View from Halfway Down that Bojack actually considers this period to be the best time of his life.
Just starting out. You and me, screwing around, hitting up open mics, trying to figure it out. I think that was the best part. Really?
The most fun and the most rewarding. And I can absolutely see that. I mean, it's visible that before fame touched him, he genuinely had a full life that he enjoyed. Sure, there was a woman that he perhaps had a crush on but was with someone else, but he had a social life, friends that supported him and lifted him up, clear boundaries with substances, and a fulfilling day-to-day with stand-up routines, even if, in the moment, he felt dissatisfied with his own progress. It's fascinating for us, as an audience, to see someone as famous as Bojack wish for a much simpler life, but it's also completely understandable, because by that point, we've seen what his career did to his personality, and, by extension, his life. He even blames the people who gave him that job, as we see in his breakup with Wanda.
Every good thing that ever happened to you happened because of network executives like me. That show you spend all day watching, your house, your career.
Great house, great career, great life. That must be why I'm so goddamn happy all the time. You don't even know.
Oh, I don't know.
My life was ruined by a network executive like you.
He literally sees horsing around as both the best and worst thing that happened to him, which might have led to his resentment of Herb as well. Because after horsing around becomes a huge success, we see that the show drives a wedge between Herb and Bojack, and sends Bojack spiraling down into the self-absorbed, inconsiderate jerk that we meet at the beginning of the show. According to a study on fame that I have linked below in the description, there is a typical cycle of behavior when somebody becomes a celebrity, and I do think that Bojack follows these stages pretty explicitly, showing how he became the troubled horseman we meet in the pilot, and that we want so badly to change back into the full person that he might have been in the 80s. Step 1 of this process is a love-hate relationship with fame. The beginning of being a celebrity and so far into the public eye is so jarring. You have people all over doting on you, and since you're new, it's pretty much all positive attention. As Anna Spanakopita puts it, there's a likability that comes with the unknown parts of someone's personality, and this character that people have built up in their minds even though they don't actually know the celebrity.
They don't love me. They don't even know me.
That's why they love you, schmuck.
He's right. Our research shows America likes to think they know you, and then they like learning more about you. But at a certain point, they pass a threshold where they actually know you, and then they find you weird and off-putting.
Says a lot about parasocial relationships, and it definitely makes people more fascinated with you in the short run. But as soon as they get to know you more, and you perhaps disappoint them, they might start to criticize. But, I mean, who doesn't like positive attention? And as you can imagine, there's a large buildup of ego that comes with this praise and affection as well. People come up to you and compliment you randomly. Everyone is nice to you, by obligation, but still, and no one will contradict you, at least at first. It's a huge difference to what Bojack was raised on, being largely ignored, and when he wasn't, being constantly criticized for simply living his life as a child. He bought into this idea that he was just garbage that couldn't change, and that it was all his fault all of this abuse was leveled at him. But when he's treated like a star all of a sudden, that perception flips heavily, and he instead puts everyone else below him, saying they were wrong to belittle him, and that he is amazing and can do no wrong, and is one of the special people, as he strove for in season 3 during the Oscar campaign. It's incredible the heights of treatment that Bojack faces throughout his life, even past this point when we're with him in the show, and it's clear to see what this has done to his mental state over the years, flip-flopping throughout extreme bouts of depression versus rampaging narcissism. It's an interesting duality, but totally understandable when you see how differently he was treated when he was being raised versus after he got his big break. To the point where when we see glimpses of Bojack soon after Horsing Around took off, he's highly demanding and arrogant. He acts like a complete diva, and he already holds low regard for those around him. His fame has gone right to his head. He's got that one painting of himself hanging in his dressing room on the set. The level of self-absorption is almost too much to handle at times. I'm glad we don't spend too much time with 90s era Bojack. He seems like an absolute nightmare. But it's not all sunshine and roses, and as Bojack puts it, you start to find that everyone likes you, but nobody really loves you.
And one day, you're gonna look around and you're gonna realize that everybody loves you, but nobody likes you. And that is the loneliest feeling.
And it can be much harder to discern who has friendly or genuinely caring intentions, or when somebody just wants something out of you. And so he puts up walls around him and acts like a total dick. Through Princess Carolyn, we hear stories about what Bojack acted like and how he treated the people who worked for him through this time of apparent high success. He's constantly dissatisfied, mostly because he's still not fulfilled after achieving his dream and discovers that fame only causes more burdens on his daily life. Plus, it doesn't fix anything about how he sees himself. So, while he is in love with the attention and praise, there is a growing dissatisfaction that is never really quelled, which is why Bojack grows to be bitter of his fame by the time we meet him, and hating when people recognize him out in public. The second step is addiction. Fame is a fierce addiction, but it isn't one that can simply be bought over and over, and it isn't easy to stay in the limelight. Even after achieving success at one point, it might not be enough to secure an entire career for you. There are one-hit wonders for a reason. You have to fight to keep it, and eventually you're willing to give up a lot in order to continuously secure your position and get another taste of that fame and being the center of attention that you got so used to as Bojack was on Horsin' Around. So when Bojack is potentially offered Secretariat, he's willing to betray his best friend and the person who is single-handedly responsible for securing this career for him in the first place. And while yes, he did technically try in the conversation with Angela to stick by Herb, and yes, Angela herself admits that this speech was carefully crafted and designed for him to decide to do nothing about Herb's departure, he still decides to do it, and Angela addresses that as well.
Oh, Herb was gay and I had to convince you to let us fire him?
Let you?
You probably don't even remember. I was terrified you were going to call my bluff.
Bluff? All this time, I thought there was nothing I could have done.
I guess I bluffed good.
Every stupid decision I made, every bad thing that has ever happened, it all started because of you.
Grow up. You play these games. If I hadn't done this, if I wasn't so that. But you did, and you were, and here we are. Here we are. Because we did what we had to do.
Rewatching this scene, there is definitely a chance at the end of the conversation for him to stick up for Herb. And we see later, too, that he could have done that and probably still had a career. I don't think they actually could have kicked him off of Horsin' Around. They have said many times that all they needed was the horse. But he was blinded by his newfound fame and attention. Angela doesn't mention anything in her big speech about how happy Bojack will be if he decides to continue on Horsin' Around, nor anything about his actual life. Just that his career will succeed, proving that, at the end of the day, that was what Bojack cared about more here. She framed the other option as him being a good friend, which is something that people want to be and something that would appeal, but for Bojack, the house always wins. Like I mentioned before, it's something he was just not ever accustomed to, and a sort of treatment that he felt he always needed to be a complete person, even if the attention only makes him feel more hollow because he's not actually working on himself or his flaws, and instead just indulging in his narcissism and all the attention he gets. Step 3 of this process is acceptance. There is always a point where a celebrity must accept that their life is simply different now, and it will never go back to the way it was before, because our society places a really high value on celebrities and tends to worship them, which I'll talk more about later. This acceptance might come with some depression and trepidation as the fear of not choosing the quote, right path for oneself begins to set in. The grass is always greener, even if you have an acting career and millions of dollars. Bojack begrudgingly accepts that his life is now filled with malice and corruption, and that he has lost most of the things that made him and sold out a lot of his soul to this industry. He settles into this idea that he's a different person now, which is also why he makes little to no effort to change at first. This is his life now, and there is no changing it, and he's gone too far to go back. And this only fuels his depressive state further until he becomes rather reclusive, which brings us to step 4, adaptation. Now, it's important to clarify that adaptation doesn't have to be a positive or healthy thing. There are many unhealthy coping mechanisms that celebrities may develop to be able to go through their daily lives. For example, it's common for celebrities to be reclusive and extremely private, not trusting many of those around them. This could be for the fact that the media attention is cruel and endless, so engaging in any way could attract an evil eye in their direction. Or simply for the fact that they are aware of the magnetic effect of their status and don't believe that anybody actually wants to talk to them for them, per se, just for their autograph or their photo, which really lowers their sense of self-worth. And if they aren't constantly kind to those around him, they can forget about any sort of positive attention for the next few media cycles. Luckily, the attention span of Hollywood is about 5 seconds long, which is also unlucky in many situations. I'll get into this more later as well. But Bojack isn't a particularly warm person from the tendencies that he developed from early fame, so he's bound to only make things worse, at least if he doesn't work on himself, which he won't because of the previous step. Bojack, after his time on Horsin' Around, rocketing to stardom, spends most of his days inside his house getting drunk to pass the time with the blinds drawn, locking out as much of the outside world as possible. Instead, resolving to rewatch episodes of his glory days, trying to relive and escape in the fantasy of his early fame, even when we see that he didn't particularly enjoy that time of his life so much because he was never truly fulfilled. It's certainly not his favorite period. This is how he deals with his new position in life: distraction and isolation. He only lets people in if they're forceful enough with him, and is largely unaware and unconcerned with the world around him. Part of this distraction also entails his personal projects, like the Bojack Horseman show or Secretariat. But, as we see, none of it really fulfills him, and without working on himself or his flaws, he only retreats further and further into these unhealthy tendencies. I do like that the show goes out of its way to say that it isn't just Hollywoo that is responsible for Bojack acting the way he is in Escape from LA.
It doesn't matter where you are, it's who you are. And that's not going to change whether you're in California or Maine or New Mexico. You know, you can't escape you.
He'd be that same bitter, desperate, lonely person anywhere he went, but I do think that Hollywood did have a hand in creating that persona, even if a lot of the responsibility can be put on Bojack. We also hear from Kelsey about the age of stagnation that comes from fame as well.
Of course, the first time Bojack dates a woman his own age, she's basically just a stunted 20-year-old.
Well, Bojack's stunted too. He got famous in his 20s, so he's gonna be in his 20s forever. After you get famous, you stop growing because you don't have to. Every celebrity has an age of stagnation.
They stop growing as people because they don't really have to, since everyone dotes on them and loves them for their talent anyway. It certainly isn't this way for everyone, as I think Kelsey is a bit overly cynical about the industry, but it is certainly difficult to take a good hard look at yourself and recognize flaws when nobody is pointing them out to you. And as I said earlier with his ego, there's a certain amount of self-absorption that comes from being famous as well, where you might see yourself as someone who can do no wrong and therefore doesn't need to grow. Not to mention that Hollywoo also distracted him from finding anything real, or actually discovering what he wanted out of his life. We see in Downer Ending that Bojack feels he might have taken the wrong path, as being famous never really fulfilled him, so he imagines an entire life with Charlotte where he starts a family and is truly happy. Of course, he wouldn't be happy here either, realistically, not if he doesn't admit his own flaws, which are still there, and actually work on them, including his substance abuse, narcissism, and selfishness. It's not like those would go away if he chose this other path or wasn't famous. As I said, Hollywoo is not solely responsible for this behavior. But there is a poignant message here about Bojack potentially living a more satisfying life and being more prepared to deal with those flaws than he would be surrounded by Hollywoo sort of feeding into them quite often. Instead, he looks for professional accomplishments to fill that void inside of him, ultimately only sinking lower when he would realize that the project itself would not fix him, and that all the love from every audience in the world wouldn't make him feel good about himself. We see this with Diane, when Bojack returns after breaking up with Wanda, that he never really even thought that anything like Secretariat would make him happy for long anyhow.
Can I ask you something? That play in New York, would that really have made you happy?
Yeah. I mean, for a little bit.
And if Kelsey didn't get fired and you got to make the Secretariat movie you wanted to make, would that have made you happy?
For a little bit. But then, probably.
So what does it matter?
It's a distraction for him to forget about his sadness and loneliness, but he always ultimately returns, because again, he's not doing any of the work, he's just distracting himself for as long as possible. Truth be told, I don't really think being happy, as some people, or Bojack puts it, is a real thing. Sometimes I feel like he sees this as like a plateau where once you reach happiness and make all the right choices, you wake up every morning excited, exuberant, and ready to go. I think ultimately happiness is an emotion like all others, and it comes and goes. You're never going to reach a point where you wake up every single morning eager to face the day. You'll have good days and bad days, like everyone does. The healthy thing is just to get out of bed anyway and be able to face the bad days. But because he's distracting himself, he wastes years and years of his life, whether it be drinking them away in his bed or on the set of some project that he isn't even truly passionate about, instead of looking for a real relationship and life that he could actually be proud of. He doesn't stop and think about what he really wants next. He merely goes through the motions. Another pertinent example, and probably the one that comes to mind first when this topic was broached for most fans, is Sarah Lynn and her parents. One of the most visible and horrifying effects of Hollywood is seen through Sarah Lynn and how she grows up.
Bojack!
Do you know how lucky we are to have this? Herb was gonna throw that all away. I made the tough choice. What did you do?
I don't know.
Bojack, she's 10.
Yeah, which is basically an adult in Hollywood years.
Here we have a perfectly innocent and lovely young girl who, through a mother who ignored her and a presence on a dangerous set with awful influences, grows into someone with extreme mental health and addiction issues. Her mother is an excellent example of the real-life phenomenon of showbiz parents. That is, people who use their children for pseudo-success and don't particularly care or pay attention to the actual needs of that child. You have another quick gag on this topic in That's Too Much Man about a couple almost selling their child out to be potentially molested by an older male celebrity, showing how vapid and so dangerously low these parents can get. I hate these two extras. Fuck these guys.
That movie star is really taking a shine to our boy. You think this is our big break?
You don't think he's inappropriately interested, do you?
What? No. But if he is, that could also be a big break. I'm just saying.
Hold on. Where are you going?
Hey, come back.
You want to take Todd for a sleepover?
Sleepover.
Jeanette McCurdy, Sam from iCarly, is a real-life example of this sadly common event in Hollywood where her mother largely forced her into acting, even though she wasn't particularly enthused about it and didn't really want to do it. She's written a book entitled I'm Glad My Mom Died that I honestly still have to read, about the intricacies of being a child star and her relationship with her controlling mother. I've heard it's amazing and extremely informative about this type of behavior. And Sarah Lynn has the same start. Right when we meet her child self on set in season 1, she states that she wants to be an architect when she's older, and she even holds this dream into her adult life.
I want to be an architect.
However, her mother states that
Mommy didn't do what Mommy did to that Star Search producer so that you could be an architect.
already, Sarah Lynn has no agency, and oftentimes these children are also the head earners of their household. We didn't see her mom doing anything else besides supporting Sarah Lynn on set, so I'm not certain there was another job there, providing for their entire families, which only puts more pressure onto them to succeed and remain in the public eye. Not to mention the fact that she said college is for ugly people who can't tap dance. I mean, that alone tells you all you need to know. Her cuteness and talent was used for profit, and it taught her that her only worth was in her appearance and stardom, even if it wasn't what she actually wanted out of her own life, which is why she stays in the public eye as a young adult as well, using her sexiness to sell albums and still allowing others to take advantage of her. After all, she was raised on this behavior. It's normal to have all eyes on her, and for her to be a spectacle whose purpose is to entertain. She could have transitioned into being an architect, but after being raised on this idea for so long, it's difficult to step out of it, especially as we see from her mother's involvement in the news cycle after her death, that the influence of her parents likely didn't stop after she was a child star either. Her stepfather even accepts her Oscar on her behalf, and not to mention she's still making music during her adulthood, even though she's fully aware of her desire to go to school and become an architect. It's also why she has such a strong reaction when Andrew Garfield breaks up with her. With him, she can stay in the public eye, but when he dumps her solely due to her relevancy, she feels she has no other worth and actually stabs herself. Season 1 is a little over the top and weird, but this did indeed happen. Meanwhile, it's hinted throughout the show that her father takes advantage of her sexually, him being a photographer and her knowing the taste of bear fur.
My mom's boyfriend homeschools me. He's a photographer. It's bear fur. I can tell. My stepdad was a bear.
Why can't you do this in Sarah Lynn's dressing room?
My stepdad's in there and he's being weird.
Ugh. And the fact that he's still around in her adult life paints a really disturbing picture about how this abuse was handled, or about how it might not have even been brought up. After all, her mother is using her, and we see over and over again that she blatantly doesn't care about her daughter, or the memory of her daughter, and really only cares about the money that she could make off of her. So she can't tell her about what's going on. And besides her family, who else does she have in her life? We see over and over again that Sarah Lynn feels isolated by her fame and doesn't have any real friends or allies to count on because everyone around her is using her. She has no support system. It's so tragic, and honestly, I'm tearing up a little writing this. But she genuinely had no one to tell. And even sadder is, after being used for all this time for her appearance and her body, this behavior isn't exactly new to her. There's no real deep dive into this abuse in the show or extended mention of it from Sarah Lynn, and we see that she hasn't distanced herself from her stepfather either. And while it is possible that this was not the intended message, and we might be reading too much into this and this abuse never happened, I think it might not have even been seen as abuse in Sarah Lynn's eyes, and that's why it's so under the radar. It's how everyone treats her. Her mother uses her for money and fame. Bojack, her surrogate father, later also uses her for sex, and in 2007 tries to use her for fame. It's a cycle of abuse that never really ends for her, and even when she is on the upswing, she still has these figures in her life. And as a result of all of this, Sarah Lynn becomes dissatisfied with her life and relies on drugs and alcohol to fill her days. She admits openly on her final bender with Bojack that she doesn't like any part of herself.
I don't like
anything about me.
Hey.
None of this is me. These boobs aren't me. This house isn't me.
We're not at your house right now.
The only reason I wear this shirt is because some company paid me $8,000 to wear it. And I don't even need the money. I just liked that someone still wanted me to wear their shirt.
And that she has sold out every piece of her personality and essence to other people and companies, despite not needing the money. Because that's what she was taught to do her whole life, and it's really hard to change your behavior on a dime. This attention that she'd been given and the pressure put on her to continually secure it created a need in her, an addiction to be useful to and entertaining to others. One that she never really outgrew, and one that consumed every other dream she had, to the point where she no longer recognized herself. After all, a lot of her image was created by other people, and her worth was directly tied to her popularity. With all that building you up, how do you grow as a person or stay in touch with yourself? I mean, you literally have media outlets telling her that she is worthless once she turned 30. It's so difficult. This is one of the reasons why, yes, Sarah Lynn is responsible for her own mental health to a point, because Hollywood is so vehemently destructive to it. We see in the moment that she breaks down to Bojack that she has never really grown up either. She still needs an authority figure to guide her and tell her what to do. She doesn't know how to move forward on her own because her entire life has been dictated for her by her parents in the industry, and she has no one else to turn to. And it isn't even entirely her fault that she's dependent on drugs and alcohol in the first place. She was exposed to the world of hard drugs and the idea of washing away your problems with alcohol from a very young age. In fact, Bojack left a water bottle full of vodka in the dressing room, and Sarah Lynn passed out drunk from it. But even without Bojack, being surrounded by this Hollywood culture, which is already fueled so much by drugs, exposes her to this ideal and makes it that much easier for her to drift towards it when she needs a quick pick-me-up. I mean, Christ, there's a dude asking for coke right in front of her after they filmed the pilot of Horsing Around. Not to mention that they went to the after party, and, I can't imagine what those kids saw there. It's not just these two, either. Really, all of the main characters are affected by this culture. For example, you have Mr. Peanut Butter's vapid and quick-moving personality and his inability to focus on himself for such a long period of time. I've already made a video on the fact that Mr. Peanut Butter is very susceptible to pop culture trends, which is the reason for him dating young women and dating the ultimate cliche woman of the time, and a lot of this behavior stems from the culture surrounding him in Hollywoo. He's a susceptible person, and someone who deeply wants people to love him and accept him. That, combined with the extremely vapid and fast-paced life of Hollywoo, turns him into a rather inconsiderate person, despite his surface-level happiness and good boy attitude, which is actually very similar to the general attitude of Hollywood. Very perfect and dreamy on the surface, but underneath it all, there's some really ugly behavior. And that kind of culture that thrives on attention and followers can really be destructive to someone who has an inherent need to fit in, and can cause them to force themselves into the mold of whatever time they're in. Again, I said this in the Mr. Peanut Butter relationship video as well, but you could see how vastly he changes across the decades, and yes, there is a point to where the outfits and lingo are just period jokes, but Mr. Peanut Butter seems to be more defined by the decades than anyone else, falling further into the culture and fads of the time. He's a dog. After all, he gets excited about things easily, especially when a bunch of other people are excited about him, and he is living in the place where trends generally start. Not to mention that in Let's Find Out, he's extremely rude to Bojack for the sake of the joke and the show.
Kind of surprised you didn't get that one, since you're an expert when it comes to denial. Quick impression. Glug glug. I'm not an alcoholic. You love it.
And we're out. 15 seconds, everybody.
Hey, pal. How am I doing?
Well, you're kind of being a dick.
Hey, are we at Tony Roma's right now? Because there's a lot of ribbing going on here.
No, I'm not ribbing you. I'm telling you, you're being a dick.
We're back.
And while he doesn't particularly want to forgive him, Wanda really pressures him to on live television. He's a very different person this episode for the sake of entertainment. And Wanda's monologue is one that's really overlooked by a lot of fans, but she is super terrifying and intimidating in this moment, despite her usually bubbly and emotionally healthy personality.
You want to host a game show where everyone feels bad at the end? You can get in your little car, drive to Santa Monica, and pitch it to AMC. But these people want resolution, okay? So you get your little butt
back on that stage and you resolve.
But when it comes to her career and creating the best entertainment, she's willing to use her friends and emotionally manipulate them into succumbing to her desire for a happy ending. It just all shows how personal relationships are twisted by show business inevitably, and how easily actors are manipulated into changing their lives simply to keep their jobs. Because, by the way, Wanda does threaten to fire him here. That whole drive to Santa Monica and pitch it to AMC thing, yeah, she's saying she'll replace him. And it's not just Mr. Peanut Butter's relationship with Bojack that's being twisted here either. It's Wanda and Mr. Peanut Butter too. Wanda's typically a very kind person and a good friend, and she was ingratiated into Bojack's friend group pretty early on. She wouldn't do something like this. But this industry and its competitive nature, especially for women in top positions, as Angela also demonstrates, forces people to be cruel and callous, and to not care about anyone but themselves and their own career. Which leads us right to Princess Carolyn struggling with apathy and success with regard to her position as an agent, then manager. There are people online who really hate Princess Carolyn, as she is a part of that extremely problematic entertainment industry that the show largely criticizes. But like all the characters, I think there's something to be said about her fighting so hard to secure her position that she sees herself as the hero, and it almost blinds her to the callous things that she does to her assistants and clients across the series. I mean, she straight up doesn't recommend Laura for a promotion because she needs her at her desk, even though Laura is fantastic at her job. We see what happens when Laura isn't around, but, you know, before Judah shows up. Princess Carolyn struggles to get work done, constantly bogged down by Stuart. Ugh. So we can understand where she's coming from, but it's still a selfish pursuit that the industry sort of pushed her into because of how hard she worked to become an agent in the first place, and to establish her name at Vim, which is a really tough and male-dominated company. There's also something to be said about the fact that when her predecessor leaves his position, he laments about the fact that he never got anything he wanted out of his life. And while, yes, he is sexist scum, I do think there was a little hint to PC about what this industry can do to you. We see that during the assistant strike, when she realizes how much she's forgotten about how difficult it is to be an assistant and to start out in this vicious world. She's been actively striking down these people who are in the exact same position she was in. It's not just fame. Success changes people. And again, it's largely centered around the entertainment industry. Now, at the head of the industry with Turtletop, she struggles to see where she came from, too absorbed by her own success and, frankly, the money that she makes from it. And it's easy to justify looking out for yourself with a baby strapped to your chest, I might add. I'm so glad that she was ultimately able to do the right thing and break through that fog that Hollywoo threw over her, bring Judah in, and saved the strike so that the assistants could actually get dignity. But it isn't just them. She's also very apathetic about most social issues, just going along with whatever's best for her client's media presence, most notably in Thoughts and Prayers, where it's clear that she doesn't actually care about gun violence or innocent lives being lost, and is instead simply concerned with how it will affect her career through the projects of her clients, namely Courtney Portnoy, whose killjoy, no-toy, perfectly coy personality already had the audience abort and snort at her assorted shortcomings rather than being supportive.
Bad news. Did you hear about the mass shooting outside Tulsa?
Oh, terrible tragedy. Thoughts and prayers. We really have to do something about these men who just go
No, PC, this time it was a woman.
A woman mass shooter? Oh no, that really is bad news.
That sort of vapid, quick-moving, and shallow culture that is at the forefront of Hollywoo and the entertainment industry can really rub off on those involved in it, especially ones that are higher up and continuously trying to secure that position. Because like I said, it's super competitive, and there are always people below you that will steal your job at a moment's notice. So when tragedies like this occur, their reaction is always centered around how it affects themselves. And while Princess Carolyn does have her own opinions about these specific issues, she still doesn't care enough to actually do anything about them. And there's also something to be said about her struggle with the allure of the industry, keeping her from what she actually wants to do with her life. She was so focused on her career and excelling in her field that she didn't get a start on what she truly wanted until far later than she wished. She was distracted for a long period of time, struggling to climb up that world with the promise of success and glamour if she was able to succeed. We see over and over when she tries to move forward to become an agent, her boss dismisses her and promises that it'll happen later. And then she gets stuck in this cycle for years and years, not only with her job, but with with Bojack as well. We see in the Bojack Horseman show that she never intended to be with Bojack for so long, and that she broke up with him before, saying she wants a family by the time she's 40. Unfortunately, the depressing part of this moment is that we know in season 1 that she does fall in and out of love with Bojack for the next 7 years, and turns 40 and still has no family in season 1. She's been distracted this whole time by the promise that Hollywood continues to make to her, and even after she makes it as an agent and then a manager, she still struggles to pull herself away from the appeal of the industry and potential success, starting her own agency and having it crash and burn, and starting her own management company. Not to mention that when she's attempting to adopt, her work life constantly pulls her away from what she actually wants to accomplish, to the detriment of her relationship with Sadie at first. I'm glad this ended up working out, but it was very annoying to watch Princess Carolyn struggle to distance herself from her job in any way. I mean, seriously, can nobody on this set handle their own shit for 3 fucking seconds? Goddamn Bojack and Diane. But it does make a good point about how needy the industry is and how involved you have to be successful in the entertainment business. But I will say one thing she does here that is extremely alarming is set Bojack up with a doctor who pumps him full of enough pep to finish the shoot. Once again, it's all about the project, and it's not about the actual well-being of the actors, even though this actor is one of her very close friends. But again, she's still only thinking about completing Filbert. That is her most important priority. Thank you, Hollywoo. Another aspect of this almost tar pit trap concerns Diane and her need to be tied to pop culture. This is more speculative on my part, but Diane does struggle a great deal with leaving LA behind in her entire life there, and it definitely does have something to do with her fight against the mainstream culture and her need to change what Hollywoo cares about. It's definitely a different type of struggle than the others, where she doesn't endorse the industry so much as become addicted to criticizing it, but I do believe that it is still largely due to the irritatingly omnipresent way mainstream culture infects the streets of Hollywood. I mean, there are many times throughout the series where she cannot tear herself away from fighting these issues and trying to push back against the tide. She wants to convince Hollywoo to actually care about issues. She wants them to take them seriously and give them ample time and research, which is just never going to happen. The attention span of Hollywoo is about 5 seconds long, and that drives Diane insane. When she's in the middle of all the Hank Hippopopolis drama, she can't even see that she is barreling forward and hurting her husband's career. She doesn't even think about his request that she take it easy with this. She has to dedicate time to it. That draw is so strong to fight back against this vapid culture, but as Diane herself says in Bojack Hates the Troops, these people feed on conflict. As soon as you engage, it doesn't become a dialogue, it becomes a spectacle, as we see with the Hank Hippopopolis stuff.
You guys think I should call in and set the record straight?
Bojack, these people feed off controversy. If you dignify the story with a response, it's just gonna fail.
I'm now receiving word that we've got Bojack himself on the phone.
It was all hate suddenly directed at her. It's a clash. I mean, look at the conversation between her and Cardigan Burke that they have on MSNBC. It is almost meaningless. And we see at the end of the episode that she is not able to actually change anything.
Hank, I have to ask, did you do it?
No, I did not.
Well, that's good enough for me. Coming up, Kanye West claims to hate Thin Mints. You can bet we'll get into this further in the next hour. This is the only thing I care about now.
Hey, smile.
The only thing that fighting did was divide her from her husband and distracted her from truly being able to work on her relationship and connect with Mr. Peanut Butter. And when Guy encourages her to move to Chicago, she has trouble leaving her life in LA fully behind. There's a certain addictive aspect to this struggle that she's dedicated most of her life to, and it might have something to do with that good damage that she mentions later in season 6. She needs her life to mean something because of what she's been through. She wants to make it mean something, and if she can fix the world around her, especially while living in the town that's extremely on the pulse of the mainstream, she'll have made it worth something. Not to mention that the lack of control she had with her siblings, father and mother taking advantage of her when she was a child, leaves her wanting more control now. And Hollywoo is able to take advantage of both of these needs, trapping her in that tar pit for a while, along with Bojack PC and Mr. Peanut Butter. There is something throughout the series in general about celebrity worship. There's lots of commentary on the show about the insane insanity of this kind of celebrity culture that kind of pervades society today, and how there is a tendency in our day and age to worship, focus on, and direct all our attention to these larger-than-life figures who are just people. Why do we care so much when they disappoint us? We don't even know them. There's lots of parasocial relationships forming because of people's access to celebrity updates through social media, and I think that our worship of celebrities has really only grown as time has gone on, to the point where even the prospect of looking at them is something that's cool. And hey, I'm not saying I'm like above all this either. I saw John Stamos on the street one time and immediately felt the need to yell, "It's John freaking Stamos!" at the top of my lungs. It's bizarre, but it's real. There's some pedestal that we as a society put celebrities on, and it's partly why so many celebrities have such a problem with ego and behavior, Bojack included. They get so many passes because people are obsessed with them and see them as not being able to do anything wrong. Just think about how celebrities are treated across the show, especially ones that are particularly on the pulse. When Bojack gets buzz from Secretariat, a restaurant is willing to kick Kiefer Sutherland out completely to make room. Whoever's most relevant garners the most attention and gets the best treatment. And the gag about them using the no smoking sign to light Bojack's cigar is priceless. We treat these people as if they're inhuman or something more than human, giving them this inflated sense of ego and pride. I mean, we all feed into it by obsessing over them, asking them for autographs, offering them gifts, when really they're just human. Specifically, the episode that this gag is from, Love and/or Marriage, deals a lot with this type of worship. I mean, there is a father giving a speech at his daughter's wedding rehearsal and relinquishes all of his time to Bojack, someone who doesn't know his daughter at all. And this is a real thing that happens at weddings too, by the way. Celebrities crash and people roll out the red carpet, and suddenly the wedding is all about how the celebrity made it special, when it should not be about them in the slightest aspect. Not to mention that they're basically just a person stealing free food and booze. But after Bojack removes that whole facade of the perfect celebrity in this episode, he shows to Tanisha that he is in fact a wounded soul, and that no matter how high the pedestal that he's put on, he will always feel low. Then you also just have shit like George Clooney's acting like a total dickhead to those around him, but it being completely okay because he's a movie star and incredibly handsome. People will just give them what they want. I mean, hell, if they just get nominated for an Oscar, they get hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts. Why? Why the fuck do they need that? They are already rich. There's a tendency in our world today to treat celebrities like they are more than human or like gods. They are our idols, when really they're just people who are doing their jobs. Yes, their job has to do with talent. Sometimes. Nepotism is also a huge factor, but so does everyone's job to a degree. Everybody has a specific talent that makes them fit to the position that they have. Theirs is just much more visible than everybody else's. And unfortunately, that visibility creates parasocial relationships, obsession, and infatuation with these people who are human and have flaws like everyone else. For those who don't know, parasocial relationships are one-sided relationships, essentially, where you might feel a connection to a certain celebrity who has no idea that you exist. But we speculate about whether they're doing okay, whether they're healthy, whether they're making the right choices, rather than just appreciating the work they do and moving on. And I'm not saying everyone does this, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm immune to this phenomenon myself, but this show does a wonderful job of showing the danger of that worship, how it affects our attention spans, the people we're worshiping, and ourselves. Not to mention that it also goes to great lengths to show that Hollywoo has a very in-the-moment culture. Bojack also goes very far, especially in season 6, to show us the inherently erratic and quick-moving world of Hollywoo, where on the surface, everyone purports to care so vehemently about whatever issue is currently in the limelight, but are ultimately willing to move on and forget it when the next big thing happens, no matter how vapid or stupid that big thing is. We see this a great deal with Bojack's cancellation. The idea of cancel culture in today's day and age is a mixed bag for me anyway. While I do think it is good that we're able to so publicly discuss and expose these acts that Hollywood tries so hard to hide under its glitzy, glamorous exterior, I also think that the actual repercussions and consequences of canceling people are spotty at best, and that even if high-up figures in Hollywood are being canceled, the narrative is still controlled by the culture and the industry. When someone is in the forefront of the news for behavior like this, it is a tirade against them. We see through Bojack that he can no longer even really go out into the world and live a normal life without those gossiping about him, giving him the finger, or straight up throwing milkshakes at him. And now, let's not pretend he doesn't deserve some of this behavior, but you have to wonder what this helps. At the end of the day, Hollywood and the media get so focused on punishing whoever's currently got the newest and worst scandal, and to prove to themselves that they're such a great person with inherently correct values, and then they end up losing focus of what they're actually trying to do. We want Bojack to admit his behavior and get help, not sink lower and lower into his addictions and repeat these cycles of behavior, which we see does happen due to the intense treatment he gets across the episode Horny Unicorn. I think the final catalyst is of course Hollyhock's letter, but this whole episode was building up to Bojack relapsing from this horrid treatment that he receives. Now again, it's not these people's responsibility to lift him up and to help him to get better, it's his. But creating such an atmosphere of hate instead of disapproval pushes him in the wrong direction. And then he's just gonna do even worse things. But then eventually, people forget. Now, I don't think that this is always true. Nobody is forgetting what Weinstein did, but he is a bit of a special case in that he kickstarted a lot of this movement, where many that were canceled simply faded away until people forgot about what they had done. And while I don't think this is necessarily all bad, as PC says, it is the best and worst thing about people, as it does give celebrities a chance for privacy and to work on themselves, which I think has happened in a few cases, but I also do think it has a habit of letting some of those off the hook. While some might be harrowed by the experience of being canceled in itself for however short a period of time, others might simply be relieved that it's over, and people forgot about it. I mean, look at Vance Wagner, tried and true piece of shit, who somehow always comes back into the public eye through some crafty publicity and sleight of hand. And people just forget about the horrible things he's done, especially when it's been papered over by him repeating his shithead behavior over and over again. But that's exactly my point here. Our ability to forget what people have done allows them to take advantage of our opinion of them, and it's something that happens more often than we realize, I'm sure. We do see in the finale that Bojack might go a little bit too far, jumping into his career right where he left off, and PC isn't particularly comfortable with him doing that because he does have to face the consequences of his actions, but it is good for Bojack to have a goal later on so that he has a reason to stay sober and to keep on this good path. Eventually, PC is right, people will probably forget about what he did, and he might be able to work again, but he can't hold hope for that. He just has to hold hope that he can stay on the right track. But thank God that this show decidedly made all these comments about how awful and manipulative Hollywoo can be. How there are parents who take advantage of their children for money. How people worship celebrities and give them passes on their abhorrent behavior. How everyone cares so much and simultaneously doesn't care at all. It's a place I would really never want to live in. Thank you very much, Raphael Bob Waksberg, for making that so. Not sure I could actually handle it. But commenting on all this natural behavior, especially for a show so involved in depicting life in LA, is so important to draw people's attention to it and get them to discuss these issues, and hopefully recognize our own patterns in the process. They say a lot about Hollywoo and how it can affect people, and hopefully it makes people more aware about what is happening to them if maybe they do end up living in Hollywood one day. Whew. Wow, this video was really therapeutic for me, as you could probably tell from how much I just, like, dumped onto you. But if you enjoyed, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's POSITVTY. There you get all these videos weeks before they go up on Patreon, or nope, weeks before they go up on YouTube, and you can get the unedited versions of these essays so you can see me mess up over and over again. Plus, you can just join for free if you want quick previews up to 2 minutes long of the videos before YouTube gets them. So it's a great way to support us, but also get more content for yourself. But all the support we get on YouTube is also very wonderful, and I appreciate every single bit of it, so thank you for that, and let me know what video I should make next. Look at this, it was a long essay, guys. I am delivering that promise that I will try to make my videos actual video essay length. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and, it's Hollywoo. By the way, Hollywoo has been underrepresented in this video, but that is the final name, as much as some fans would not like to admit it.